Welcome, everybody. All right, so today I just want to welcome Mufaro Nyachoto with us today as our guest speaker. As mentioned in previous episodes, we'll be running 20 episodes over the year, and they will be run fortnightly. There will be a mid-year break from July to August. And so we're looking at having great guests from all over the world share their stories around AI and so forth. Just to introduce our hosts for today. So co-hosting with us is Omar Gawad. He comes up with wonderful questions for our guest speakers, some tough questions sometimes for our guest speakers. Omar is an architect, he's an analyst, he's a strategist. He also runs his own YouTube channel, which is The Analyst Architect. So do check that out. Really great work. And thanks for organizing this for us, Omar. Appreciate that. Today, stepping in for Alain, we've got Andre Spies. And Andre is the CEO and co-founder of Aidon.ai. So he is working as an architect for several years. He was formerly the CIO of Swanee Municipality, and he brings a lot of insight into what AI, architecture, analysts, and all of that has on the table with practical advice. And Andre is particularly good at providing practical advice to our teams. So thank you, Andre, for stepping in today. Appreciate it. And then myself, I am Deirdre Caren. And I run Aidon as well. I'm a co-founder of Aidon. And I also have Agora Insights, where I train people from all over the world on architecture, analysis, and AI. And I've been going now for about 8 years. And we have learners from almost 100 countries. So that has been quite a wonderful experience. But let's move on to our guest speaker today. So Mufaro, she is a seasoned business analyst. So Mufaro has been working for many years and architect specializing in transforming healthcare and higher education organizations through people-focused change technology solutions, with certifications including CPAP and CAPM, and a master's in information technology management. Mufaro excels in streamlining operations and enhancing service delivery. Her collaborative approach fosters partnerships that drive efficiency and nurture positive working culture. Awesome. Well done, Mufaro. That sounds fantastic. So today our theme is going to be a collaboration with AI. And how do we work with the technology and the new innovation that's happening, but keep humans in the loop? So fantastic. Looking forward to that. So welcome, Mufaro. It's wonderful to have you join us today. I'll hand over to you, Omar.
Thanks so much, Deirdre, and thank you so much, Mufaro, for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you on this series, and welcome everyone to today's sessions. I will begin with something that I see a practical point to start with, which is the communication. We all know that communication is what sets humans apart from machines, at least for now. From your experience, how we can utilize this important skill, the communication, in the AI transformation initiatives?
So I would say this most important thing is that people are heard and seen. And part of the problem right now is people have so much misinformation about AI, the future of work, what it can do. Everyone seems to be afraid of it's going to take their jobs or result in something crazy that's going to kill everybody. It's so many bizarre things out there that I think it's most important that people are given opportunities to hear what AI can actually do. They're given opportunities for training. They can discuss openly and be heard. So there are feedback loops so they understand what exactly is AI? How is it going to impact me? Why do we have it? What are the guardrails? That kind of thing, instead of making up wild assumptions that they're getting really interesting, including the movies lately. I've noticed about killers and things. I love it, but there's got to be a truth and we need to share it so people are more willing to adopt this technology and not just shove it in a corner And the world's going to keep moving. Change is happening so fast. We need people to adopt it. And communication is the bridge between adopting AI and reducing resistance, I'm going to say, for people.
That's great.
Yeah, fantastic. So when we look at, let's go 2 years ago before the explosion in AI, we all started running quick chats and so on. And now all of a sudden we've got almost like this invisible colleague with us in certain workplaces. So how do we ensure that with businesses now starting to use AI, how do we ensure that the AI strategies and solutions engage with people rather than excluding them? When you roll out these IT projects, often what happens is it's basically a group of people that selects a tool that the business is now going to use. But with AI, because it's potentially a threat, as you mentioned, to the individuals, how do we include them in the strategies?
I think it's really important that they are included, of course, in the communication about it. That change management piece is so important. And I think in a lot of IT projects, that actually is missing, that part where it's what's happening, why, let's be transparent, let's hear from people. And I think the other part is letting them have a say. Let's let them co-create so they can give their input, they can share their experiences so that they're really they're really put into the creation and they're not just saying, it's been given to me, it's going to impact me, but I had no say. That's also going to increase resistance down the road. And your IT initiatives or your AI initiatives are probably going to have a lot harder, what's the word? They won't succeed and they'll probably have lots of gaps or people will go around them.
Yeah. I believe because it's such a potential personal impact to the individual role, it's even more important to, as part of the change management, to include individuals, where before it was just the tool, but now you almost have this invisible colleague, and that's performing part of your work. The resistance is just going to be even more escalated.
I love that idea of your invisible friend. I have friends that have actually named their AI things, or you get that personality after you developed it, and it's like my friend who helps me do this, my friend, and they have names, and it's funny actually. I do love that though.
I love naming my AI. I've got lots of them, Archibald and Anne, and yeah, so quite a few of them. I was wondering, with regards to those questions, what if people in organizations are really keen to use it, but the business doesn't want to? Because that's the other side of it. A lot of the guys are going, hey, we've got this tool, we could really use it, but now we don't want to use it. So I'm going a little bit off script here, but I was wondering what if, not that they're resistant to it, but they eager, but there's guardrails in place to say, no, hold on, you can't use it. That's another problem. Yeah.
I think that's a really good point, but I know, especially where I am in California, Silicon Valley is down the road somewhere. People actually a lot of people have been using it, but not using the right edition or version. So they're using their own private, which is unfortunately exposing companies to their AI, their IP is being exposed. They could be losing things. They're sharing things that don't need to be shared. I think there need to be rules and processes that say, we're going to use it. It can make our lives much easier. We can process things faster. It'll get that grunt work out, but we have to make sure that companies are telling their employees how they can use it, give them the instances that they can use, because no one wants to use their IP and say, I could have had that next great product and boom, put out there and now it's all gone. But I think, yeah, there's a lot of, I've heard people saying they're secretly using it, and that's kind of makes me cringe. But yeah, companies have to realize it's coming. We can't just push it in a corner. If you're not using it, you're going to get behind. You're going to become, obsolete? That could be a great differentiator for companies. So they need to actually get the right architects and people in board to help them with that.
Yeah, agree. Because it's like saying, oh, we're not going to have the internet. And that's what happened 30 years ago. It's going to happen.
It's here.
It's here. I agree with you. So maybe just moving from your experience, if we look at at cross-functional teams. So how do cross-functional teams communicate their AI projects? What are the ways in which we could look at their mindset to understand that this is a collective thing, not just a single project in isolation? And I know this happens often in projects because AI projects often bring very different perspectives, different teams together, analysts together, and so forth. And so communication is really important. So how do we manage teams working across the AI projects and so forth?
That's a good point, especially when you have, as you put it, business and technology teams. One of them is probably really keen to implement it, and the other one's probably going, what are we going to get out of it? So I think the most important thing is to understand the why. What is the business need? Not just go, we're going to go implement something because it sounds cool. What is the real reason that we're going to need this? So what is the business going to get out of it? And it's always hard to clarify like the return on investment on an AI project, I think. At least I haven't figured out yet how people are doing that. When you have people, you can say, we've got this many people, we're getting this outcome. But when it's AI, how do you figure out what's the outcome? What's it delivering according to how much money you're putting into it? So I think it's very important that people share a common vision. So they need to have a shared terminology. They need to sit together. They need to actively listen. Why do you want to do this? What's going to come out of it? And then road mapping. So architects, of course, will play a really important role in that future vision. So it's like, how do you get people aligned? Let's listen to each other. Let's work towards one common objective. And I think that would hopefully keep people from doing all that siloing and thing that they do where they make the little indents and it breaks down because no one wants to give in. And I think that's really important. So if we're going to have a shared vision, a shared terminology, and we're going to bring everyone along, and we're going to be aligned with our real business needs, which is really great for analysts. Of course, I used to be a business arc analyst for years, and I always believe if you know that business need, you can get almost anywhere.
It's just about to say, and Omar will contest to this, really understanding the business need is so important in success and working together. That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. And especially that we often say that analysts and architects are acting as a translators between the business and the technology and understanding or elaborating more the business need to all the technology people and all the technology roles to make sure that we all have the same understanding. But let's be honest, AI is now disrupting everything across the industry. From your experience, what is the role of business analyst and business architect play in ensuring that the people stay in the loop as they were before AI, but after integrating AI and after AI becomes more into our business processes and into more into our business models?
I think the best answer that I could give is that I think they're both translators. So one is more business analysts. We tend to be more on the business side. So they're working with more with the operational people. And the architects are working more on the strategic side. So they can have that roadmap that shows where we're going with our AI initiatives. And I think both of them should be involved in developing standardized feedback loops, make sure there's continuous communication, making sure that leadership across the different levels, not just really high, can speak to it so that everybody understands why are we doing this? What are we getting out of this? Or for staff, what's the opportunity for you? I think the greatest thing I find is I used to be a programmer years ago, and crunching through lots of data. You code it, you have to go through it. I think AI can do that for me just great. But I think as long as there's a human being in there that can also do some of that after review and challenge things, I think people should see that AI is going to get rid of a lot of the things that we don't want to do, those tasks that are just tedious and make our lives, what do they say, keep that strategic high-level work, more meaningful work that you can do. But yeah, I think that's important that they work together, but they work at different levels. So operational versus the strategic, and make sure those communication loops are maintained even after the project is initiated, because it's not going to go away. And you don't want people to go change management. If you don't keep people in the loop and keep them fed with information, they're going to go back to their old ways. We don't want that.
I really like what you said about the architect and the analyst being translators at the core of it. And with AI, at the moment, the ultimate translator, it's so quick. It's not called a large language model for nothing. You can ask it anything and it can translate it, depending on how well you structure it, almost to talk to any audience. So especially for architects and analysts, I believe that this will be a great colleague, the invisible colleague again, because it can take away some of those mundane or boring or time-consuming tasks and actually get you into the knowledge space rather than just the activity space. So, with that being said, why does human-centered communication remain a core strategic skill for professionals? Understanding that you've already partially answered this question, let's just put a formal question to it.
I think our lives are so complicated. We're always on our tablets, we're always on our computers. Everything is sort of technology. I think people really want to have that human connection. They want to be able to express their fears, get reassurance. And I think if you have, like, if let's say you had something that was, I know like in Silicon Valley, they were laying people off. And I think some of them were just sending out mass emails. Can you imagine how debilitating and depressing that is? So maybe you can have processes built where AI is doing certain tasks. Everyone's aware of what those are, but then the news is delivered by people. People are inserted into the process to make sure it's more humane and kind, and there's empathy and active listening. I think that would make the world a much better place. Because we're human beings, as you put it, we think and we feel. And that's what I think our best thing is. We've gone this far by being collaborative and supportive. That's how human beings have always been. I think that's our greatest strength. So I think we have to keep that in there.
Yeah, the lack of emotions. There's a lot of writings at the moment where on the one end, they talk about the bias of AI. Yeah, it's so fast, but then its bias makes it hallucinate, or then you hear again, it doesn't really care about the culture. It just provides you with the quickest or the best answer, and it doesn't care about your feelings. And I believe that's so important, especially every business has got its own culture, whether it's good or bad culture. But how do you get AI to necessarily emulate the culture? And that's where the people comes in. You have to continue to actually take the message and still convert it into, or add the emotion, or at least evoke the emotion and capture that. And we can only do that as humans at this point. I'm actually starting to get tired of we now have to qualify this at this point because we don't know how things change because it changes so quickly. But yeah, so
I love that because I actually follow this group that does, is it the Gatherverse? And people are saying one day we're going to have AI will be our best friends and we'll put them in robots and and I always think, okay, it's kind of like that TV show they had years ago called Humans, where the robots had feelings almost, and I thought thinking, I love the show, but I don't know if I really want that in life, but who knows what people will develop in the future. And there are kids now that have AI best friends. I think there's an app they're trying to develop in Silicon Valley where your best friend is, and I think that's sad because right now we have a thing where there are certain generations that, because of the pandemic or whatever, they're already having those problems communicating. So I don't think that would be the best thing for them. I think they have to stay on that communication empathy track. So hopefully that is definitely built into processes and people think about that, because I might like people to give me logic, but we're not Data, we're not Spock. We need to have some sort of connections.
So true. I also think that when you have like just a simple thing, right? So you phone the call center and then you get a bot responding. It's very frustrating. Initially, even when they used to do routing, so they would say, press 1 for this, press 2. People often went to the other because they just wanted to talk to a person. And I think this is such an important point because at the end of the day, humans don't want to have to talk to bots. They're there to do a specific thing. They're there to perform a function. They're there to help. But mostly, if I want to talk to a client or I want to meet with somebody, I want to speak to a person. I want someone that I can relate to. So, yeah, I think it's so important that we don't lose sight. We don't go AI first, we go human first using AI. I think that is going to be so important. So then my question is, how can communication practices support ethical responsibility of AI? And that is really looking at how do we talk about the responsibility? How do ethics come up? What is ethics? And I know Andre mentioned a little bit around the biases and so forth. So how do we bring that into this exciting environment of AI, but how do we make it real for people? What is actually needed?
I think if we want to speed up the adoption of AI and the use, we have to make sure people trust it. And by trusting it, we have to be transparent about what it can do. I think we have to make sure we set expectations so people don't think it can do, who knows, but we have to manage their expectations. This is what it can do. This is what it can't do. This is what it might do. As you mentioned, hallucinate. Some of them still do. So I get great answers and I just think, oh no. We have to make sure that people are able to provide their experiences back to us as feedback. So how are you experiencing it? What do you see? So I think if we do that, and also governance. I know some people say that we should just let it go and let it do what it wants, but I think it's important that we can pull back a little and say, it does this. How can we, if not, I don't know if one day we might not be able to take it back what it does, but how can we at least mitigate it, respond to it? And I think it's important to know, what is AI doing? What are people doing with it? What are people doing to it? Are we programming it? Is it a thing? And I think it's a lot of things that people have to still work down the road that people have not done. And maybe the next 5-10 years that'll be answered. But I think it's going to come down to, do people trust the system? I know people probably had a hard time when they gave up their data for automation to banking online and things. But how do you overcome resistance? And how do you make people want to use it? But you have to then deal with the biases and make sure it's not causing harm and that sort of thing. And I'd love to be part of that conversation more, but yes, I'm waiting to see what happens there.
Yeah. It's challenging.
Yeah, it is. I want to get back to a point, Mufaro, you mentioned regarding the cross-functional team and the communication between business and technology, and how we can manage the expectations between what the business needs and what are really needed, or what are the capabilities of AI. From your experience, what have you found the biggest communication issue or challenge, let's say, when aligning what is possible technically with the needs of the business?
I think it's unrealistic expectations about what people can get, or people are just afraid of AI and what it might do to their processes, their jobs, their team. And I think where it's hard to say, we keep hearing on the news, it's going to come and take all these jobs. I think instead of that, we need to think of, what is it going to give us actually? What's the opportunity? What are the benefits? How will your job change? Not, here are all the negative things, and we'll just check you out and some robot's going to come into your job, or chatbot. So I think when people are aware of what can it really do, and I think there's also a thing of, I don't know how the costs are determined around teams and AI yet. I think all that has to be made aware to people so that they're not feeling, oh, if it comes in, this whole team might be obliterated, or my team's going to lose, and the tech people will become more valuable. So that has to be worked out in the organizational structure. But yeah, so handling that expectations especially, I think, is that, and yeah, conquering the fear.
Yeah, to some extent, I think what's really hard, because you mentioned before, we need to see how it goes, and then also managing those expectations. I think what's missing at the moment is, how do you measure something? How do we put in place some measures on the unknown? Because also, as mentioned before, with the adoption of the internet 30 years ago, it took quite a while for the adoption, and most people, it was also an access issue. The technology weren't there, not everybody had the internet, and then when you did have the internet, nobody in your house could make a phone call. And I know for the younger people that doesn't make sense, but that's certainly something I went through. So now we're sitting in a situation where we know it's going to change. We know we're going to go through the same cycles and so on, but at seven times the speed of what we went through with the internet, for example. So my formal question to you is, as AI will become more prevalent, and it will involve or touch more and more people, even the children, as you mentioned, with their best friends potentially. How can we make sure that the communication doesn't just become an exchange of data, just an exchange of information, and lose that emotional intelligence, I suppose?
Yeah, it's sad. No, I think we're going to have to make sure that people are involved. So if we're going to use AI for projects, we have to make sure we have clear roles and clear activities that it will do. And we have to make sure that we also have continual training. We have those continuous feedback loops. Because, yeah, can you imagine if you just keep getting everything is processed and you just get sent things and there's no context to it, there's no human like empathy, no logic behind it. So why did I get this? You just got it. That would probably destroy most people. You have to have that human connection still. We still have to have, remember, people like and trust and want to work with people who they can talk to, they can build trust with. And I think it'll still be hard to do that with AI, whether you put a pretty face on it or whatever. People will use it, but how do you get them to use it, like it, trust that they're getting the right stuff out of it? You have to have human beings still involved somewhere in that process, whether it's at the intermittent stages or it's the end. People have to be involved. You can't just hand it over. And I know I've heard someone say that it was Sam, his kids will probably, AI will be smarter than his kids. Maybe, but I like to think there'll still be teachers and different things that'll keep them, help them use it and understand it and provide governance. So we can't just hand everything over to AI and technology.
That's so true. And to what you mentioned before, in the workplace, I think we all have, you can work with a team of colleagues, but you can have your favorite colleagues, and it's because that's built on a personal relationship or personal connection that you have at the workplace. So we've got our favorites, and even if it's not like a professional friendship, we all have the preferred individual that we would assign a task to because we trust in what we can expect from them. And to a very large extent, if we lose that, I think you're potentially going to lose what makes the team or what makes the business. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll just say a little bit more about that. And actually, there was a really good point mentioned about our conversations aren't about data, right? We're not the machine. Our conversations are around the human experience, what we see, what we feel, what we go through, and all of those kind of things. So, and AI is just built on data and historic data, to be fair. It's not even built on what might be in the future. That is for us to say. That's AI can make predictions, and it's pretty good at some predictions based on the data, but you never actually know what the future will be. And I think that's where we're really good. So sometimes it's not the tech or the timeline that makes the difference, but it's how people talk, listen, and collaborate. So do you perhaps have an example of where a strong communication helped rescue or accelerate an AI or digital transformation initiative? So where it made it very clear that if we were not communicating correctly, this could have gone very differently to what we expected.
No, actually, I could not think of one. I've had some projects that have gone wrong because people weren't communicating, or they tried to keep their knowledge sharing was low and they were afraid of what was going to happen. But no, mostly, I think a lot of the companies I've been working with, they're still trying to figure out AI. They're still trying to figure out if they're going to let people use it in the way they want to use it, which is why people are still hiding it in the backgrounds. And it's interesting to watch where we have to get more training out there. There are people who their favorite thing to say is here's my type. They use it as I call it a basic cleanup. They're not really understanding the power of AI and what they can do with it. So it's interesting watching as people here, especially where I am, try to figure it out still. And the people who have already figured out and built tools, and it's amazing to see. So I guess I just have to wait and see. But I'm hoping that people will understand that as long as you make it accessible to everyone, I think that'll be the greatest problem. People have to have access. People have to be kept in the loop and provide feedback. And I think it'll be really amazing to see how projects go. But right now, I think it's still a battle between what they're going to let people develop with their AI.
Yeah. Maybe just one additional question on that is, in business analysis, one of the very important things we have to do is validate and verify. And we have to go through a process of going, okay, are the requirements correct? Are we validating those requirements? Are we getting the best option? So is it feasible, or what we are doing? And when working with AI, do you feel like there's a level of that validation and verification that's happening? Or do you feel that kind of skill of validating is we're just trusting the outputs that you get in from AI and going, oh, this sounds really good because it's written so beautifully. But actually, when you dig a little bit deeper, you go, oh, it's not quite what I was thinking. So what are your thoughts around the validation and the verification process that we've had to traditionally go through, but now we're having to look at AI slightly differently because it's very convincing?
I think it depends on the tool. I've noticed I like to use the different tools, whether it's Chat or Claude or whatever. They're all fascinating what they'll give back. I always tell people that they should feed information to Chat and then look at it. I've seen people just go, I'm doing this project and give me a bunch of requirements, and then they try to back end it in a weird way. And that's not what an analyst is supposed to do. That's almost like taking us back to being more, not order takers, but that's not our role. I think that people need to understand, go do your stakeholder engagement, go collect the things, go understand the real need, because yeah, Chat GTP and them are so good at pulling data from the different things that they have that they can make up a whole use case and give you, but are those real requirements? Are those real? Did you really validate it? Did you check it with people? And I think that's going to be a problem for people who are maybe newer analysts and don't understand that it's supposed to help us. We don't start with it. We use it to help with our work. And then you need to do that verification and validation, get those sign-offs, all human activities. You can't just hand those over, but I have seen people trying to do some interesting things with that. So
And I think you're making a really good point, because this means that the upskilling of the roles need to be done, because you're going to have to sense make a lot of the things that's coming out. And so even though, let's say, capturing the information is quicker using AI, it doesn't always mean it's better. So it's quantity versus quality. And people are going to have to really learn how to analyze. I've always said this is so important, because in projects we've really just needed boots on the ground, right? And the analysis bit hasn't been that important. It's been, oh, how many people do we need to get this project going, right? Whereas now it's, what kind of people do we need to get the project going, and what level of understanding. So humans need to become more knowledgeable in their role compared to what they, before it was like, this person knows something, we'll get them on board, right? They're going to know it's going to, and you're right, that training, truly understanding the environment, that's going to be so important. Yeah, so I agree.
they can really elevate the profession instead of just going, yeah, we'll let it thing. And then, yes, they can really do that high value work and deliver better outcomes.
Exactly.
I think what I took from what both of you said is that one of the potential positive, unexpected, well, I didn't expect it until this interview. One of the unexpected outcomes of this would potentially be more defined role definitions for humans. The traditional job description that you apply for, and there's always that final sentence or final paragraph or anything that your manager might expect that's reasonable. That could include potentially anything, but also to the business analyst who's not really a trained business analyst, or I'm not picking on business analysts, by the way. I'm just saying, if this is just collecting information and putting it in a document as requirements and you always got away with it, now AI can actually do a far better job from just taking a transcript from a meeting and putting it as requirements. So you actually going to upskill to the role as it's defined and not just put information on a sheet of paper or on a screen anymore. It could actually be a real positive thing for humans where you now have a better idea of what you need to do and you can apply that knowledge as opposed to just be stuck in the boring loop of producing artifacts.
I totally agree with you, Andrew, I think, and I can relate with what you are saying, especially in nowadays where any AI tool can replace whatever tasks any business analyst or even the architect as well can do. I won't say deliverables or full deliverables, but it will prepare some artifacts instead of business architect or business analyst. So I think the communication part and the interaction part is crucial. And to be honest, I have met some smart and motivated professionals, whether in the business or especially in the business analysis and business architecture part, where they didn't want to contribute to any AI project yet. They are fearing of being replaced, or they are hesitant of being, I would say, that AI will take their place, or AI will tomorrow our CEO will, okay, this is an AI solution that I don't need you. So they have to, I would say, grab all the information. They will be the only source of information in the company. Don't share this information with others to make sure that they secure their position in this transformation. My formal question to you, Mufaro, in this regard, what advice do you have that you can give to these professionals that, okay, it's fine to contribute to AI transformations or projects, even if you are not speaking the tech language, or even if you have the fear or you are hesitant that you will not be able to be replaced or something like that?
I hate hearing about people creating silos like that. I think the most important thing is you could become that translator, translate the business need to the technology team. You can be a champion. You can own the business need or the problem. So get yourself involved. Make yourself aware of what AI can do. Try to learn at least the basics of it. So you can help other people overcome that fear, because it is here and it's going to keep coming. And I think it's important that if you can champion it and you can be that bridge, then you can have an input and help co-create that solution. I think the fear is probably, everyone was a little fearful probably at first, like you mentioned, the internet. It's here. Everyone loves it now. Can you see a life without it? And I think in a couple of years, people will be like that with AI. It's more, what can it do? How is it going to help me? How does my job get better? What can I do now that I couldn't do before? As he put it, upskill the roles. It'll open up opportunities in AI jobs and also in jobs that we already have. So as long as people are open to change and willing to help, you don't have to be very technical. You just have to want to help co-create and have some say. And I think there's a lot of areas for that for people. And you know, leave the tech to the really technical people who want to develop all the models or whatever. But
You touched on another interesting word there. People don't need to be technical. And I find that 30 years ago, the word technical meant a whole different thing to what technical is today. We can all, my mother, who's an older woman, she knows how to write an email because she knows how to type. All you need to be able to do is to know where to click and type a sentence, and you can start to embrace it and educate yourself that it's not that scary. Because the reality of all of this is, if you resist the adoption of AI, you will be excluded. Whereas if you don't, you won't, potentially. It's just the reality of it. It is going to be with us. So if you resist it and you don't adopt it, you're going to be left behind. And then to be able to really validate or say why you need to be there when a replacement has been found where you've AI or a human replacement has been found where the business wants to continue, you're going to be in trouble. That's the reality, I believe. I don't know how to put a positive spin on it, but it is a reality.
Well, I
Don't
think
be
the
that person who gets
spin is-
replaced.
Yeah, I think the positive spin is there's a warning. So do something or don't do something, but you're not going in completely blind. And I think that's important. Brad, I don't know if you have any questions you want to ask Mufaro or one of us. Feel free.
Yeah, I
I
think
think
maybe
that-
one of the questions I would have is I think about quantifying risk. And as we're evaluating a new tool and how are we going to integrate that? And we want to build efficiencies. So the goal is to replace some of the human work, but how do we quantify, okay, what are the risks that we're aware of in whatever process? And how do you quantify which risks need human intervention versus, nope, this risk we're comfortable with offloading that to an AI. So just curious if you've ever thought about it like that, or if you have any recommendations there.
Well, I'll say I
I'll-
thought about,
Yeah,
oh, you
go
go
for
ahead.
it. No,
I've
yes.
always tried to figure out what the metrics, like the KPIs, are around AI initiatives. So the risk part would be interesting, but I don't know exactly how you'd figure that out unless you're looking at what's the organization's risk level. Are they open? What are they open to? I think that's probably the biggest thing that will factor into that. And probably the other part is maybe you could take the risk now and try to put some sort of score and metric to it. But other than that, I really don't know how you could really quantify them, as things are changing so fast with AI. I haven't any idea yet how to do that. So I can go back to you, Deirdre.
From an architecture point of view, and actually Andre and I had a very long discussion around this about a couple of days ago when we were looking at the updates to the BizBook on the dynamic rules routing. And one of the things that I think we need to, if we look at the human in the loop process or workflow that we have in AI, if you do rules-based routing, so in other words, AI can only do certain things based on certain rules, this could help. And this is where the human in the loop becomes really important, because as architects, you can then go and say, okay, what are the rules that we need to create at certain gated points? When we are doing a workflow, let's say we're doing a workflow around, I don't know, strategy, or doing the requirements, for instance, or we're managing a case for somebody. So you want AI, let's say you're dealing with a case, you've got a patient, right? So you're doing case management. So you want AI to get as much information as possible, but you also have some rules like the privacy, what kind of information that AI can pull out, the who, the what, the why, the when, those factors all matter in understanding how the rules would apply to AI. And this is why I think architecture is so important. Analysis is looking at the end result, but architecture is structuring it in a way that we can ensure that we putting in the ethics and the rules from the beginning. And when I say ethics, I'm not talking about, oh, is AI this amazing tool and should we use it or shouldn't we? I'm actually talking about very specific things. We put in a rule to say this is what we stand for as a business and what we believe, and AI responds in that context. And I think that's the important thing. So I have no idea if I've answered your question, Brad, but that was where I was going with this.
I like the approach of the rules-based routing, because then I think you could start to maybe build some rules or with kind of that risk profile in mind of, okay, we will allow AI to interact with these types of data sets, or this AI tool, we're going to build a gate so that if the decision requires access to this data, then that requires a human in the loop. And that could be due to the sensitivity of the data, the complexity, maybe versus like how structured it is. So I like the rules-based routing approach.
Awesome. Andre will be happy. He had to fight with me because I was like, oh, I hate teaching those. But now I see the value.
I just wanted to add on this because I love rules-based routing. But if it comes to risk assessment, my rule of thumb is low-hanging fruit. What is the obvious risk? You go for that first and start the conversations and point that out. And because of the human nature, which is quite appropriate for this interview, because of our human nature, you quickly find from the amount of questions that you get whether there's even more risk to explore. Because resistance comes from what? Either a personal or a professional trigger. So your role or your position is telling you to ask further questions, whether it's to protect yourself or to protect your team or your status or whatever the case may be. Pick on the low-hanging fruits. Now, how does this relate to rules-based routing and Deirdre's comments before? When you've got a rigid process that we have defined in the business and it's followed for whatever governance or just for procedural reasons or to have a common work practice, whatever the case may be, it's actually pretty easy to automate that as a business analyst when you find a process that's well defined to describe the automation, because digital transformation is basically automating some of our previously manual work. That's what it is. When you escalate that into the case management already, I can clearly go, if this is a case, then there's going to be more risk, and therefore my risk value is going to be higher because there's more unknowns, there's more knowledge workers involved, just because of the amount of dynamic rules that's involved. The low-hanging fruit in this example would be, obviously, if it's a process, it's less risky, or it's easier to identify the risk, I should rather put it that way, than when it's a case, a business case that involves multiple departments and multiple knowledge workers, multiple decisions, then obviously it's going to be harder to identify that risk. So if you start there, you pretty quickly see that you're not going to lack in the amount of risk identifiers you're going to identify yourself.
I also think that, your point there around some of the low-hanging fruits would be processes that we know are simple, they can use, and AI can do them. We can remove the human element because we trust that process is very routine. But yes, for the complex stuff, you absolutely need to have checkpoints where humans are going, hang on, the spot's going a bit nuts. I don't know why it's suggested. I think it was Marco last week that mentioned that the AI said they would give bereavement flights for free. So the customer asked the question and AI said, yes, we'll give you a free flight. And they had to, give the client a free flight, but AI had just decided that was what it was going to do. So a case management approach there with dynamic rules routing would have been a better approach than a process-driven response. Anyway, we deviate somewhat, but hopefully, Brad, that has helped you, and we will look a little bit further into that next week when we do the BizBock update 14. So yeah, that's some good things coming up there, and I think it will be quite exciting. So thanks for a great question. Mufaro, thank you again for talking about why people matter. I think it's such an important thing to have. The AI and the tech is very exciting. It's new. It is something we all want to have a go at and try things. But at the end of the day, it still doesn't beat the human communication and connection. There's just no ways. I haven't seen that. It does write nicer letters when I'm mad. Puts it out better. Which is good, but yes, it's not a person at this point. So thank you for your time. Omar, your final thoughts?
Yeah, thanks so much for such an insightful discussion. I really enjoyed it. And thanks for reminding us that all of us have a role in shaping the AI transformations, not only for engineers. Thanks so much again.
Andre, your final thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Mufaro, for the human conversation. I find it interesting that we are, as humans, having conversations and about this, to just about AI, just to prove that we need humans to sell AI. So even in something as simple as us talking about it, we all have different perspectives, even when we agree on points. So thank you so much, and your nice way of explaining things. So I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. This was really fun, and collaboration is great because you always get diversity of thoughts. And AI wouldn't exist if we had people innovating and thinking. So I think it's really awesome. People have to remember AI exists because people got together, they talked, they communicated, and they came up with them. Very important. So thank you so much. You guys are awesome. This is a great conversation.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
so much. That was great. So really appreciate that. And we'll call it a day.